Hi, I'm Colleen. Hello. Happy January. Let's do a Books of the Year video. So I'm a little different. I do think the majority of booktubers like to do their Books of the Year videos in December. I don't. I do it in January, and I'm really happy this year I did because literally the last book I read that I finished in the late afternoon on New Year's Eve was one of the best books I read all year, and I would have been really sad to have left it off the list. In this video, I'm going to give you my top books in every genre I read. There's not like a set number because some genres, there were more books that I really loved than others. And then my winner. And then after that, I will tell you what book I thought should have won each of the Goodreads categories that I read in. And then after that, I'll tell you my best 6 books of the year because I couldn't narrow it down to 5. I had to do 6, and doing 10 felt a little extravagant considering 4 of them would have been not my best books of the year. So you're getting 6. All right, let's get started. We're going to start with romance. I have 5 books in the romance category, and the first one is The Scoundrel Falls Hard by Sophie Jordan. This book has one of the best openings I've ever seen. We have our hero who is on the run trying not to be hanged for impersonating the son of a duke, and our heroine, who is a female blacksmith in the Regency, hides him. And then they have to pretend to be in love so the town won't kill him. And this book was fantastic. This was the 3rd book in the Duke Hunt series by Sophie Jordan, which I really enjoyed all of, and I recommend everyone read. It's very cozy and fun. Great read. 5 stars. Loved it. Next up, we've got The Bride Goes Rogue by Joanna Shupe. This is the 3rd book the 3rd book in the Fifth Avenue's Rebels series. My neighbor just drove by and stared at me. In this one, we have Catherine, who has thought she's engaged to Preston and that he's just like shy and not talking to her. And she shows up at his office. She's like, we have to plan our wedding. And it was arranged by their parents, which his father has since died. And he's like, I'm not marrying you. And she's horrified. But then she goes on this journey of self-discovery, during which he's kind of watching her and like, why are you suddenly so attractive now that you're like this independent woman? I loved this book. It was fantastic. It's very steamy, extremely steamy. Okay. It's got some role playing in it, which for Gilded Age, which is like late 1800s America, wealthy people, was very fun. And it has a great heroine. So what I like most about Joanna Shupe's books is that she gives her heroines very realistic careers/causes for the time period. So Catherine wants to open a museum in New York City, which at that time is something a very wealthy woman could have done. So I really liked it a lot. Loved it. I shouldn't say really liked it. I loved it a lot. And it cemented how much I adore Joanna Shupe. The previous book in the series was The Lady Gets Lucky, and I loved that one so much. I really liked book 1, but I loved Lady Gets Lucky. And then this one cemented that Joanna Shupe's actually a fabulous writer that everyone should read. Next up, I have a paranormal romance, and it's called The Deep by Desiree Nicolai. This is like flesh-eating mermaid meets who doesn't know she's one. She doesn't know she's one. Meets hot fishing captain who saves her. And then they try to date, and she's also trying not to eat him. And there's some eco-horror and all the cozy coastal Maine vibes in late autumn, and I loved it. Loved it, loved it, loved it. The sequel's coming out at the end of this month. I will inhale it and review it for you and make you read these. You're welcome. Next up, I have Always Practice Safe Hex by Juliet Cross. This is the 4th book in the Stay a Spell series, and this one is about Livy and Gareth. And I was actually really surprised I love this book so much because it has a couple of tropes that I don't really like. One being workplace romance. I've never worked in a traditional office, so I think that's part of the reason. I've always worked in like schools and libraries and bookshops, so that might be why I don't really like office romance stories. And enemies to lovers. But Juliet Cross wrote this so well that I fell in love absolutely with both of these characters, especially Gareth, who's a Grimm, which I really like this sort of supernatural type creature because he's very secretive, very dark, lives like 1,000 years. Very fun. If you haven't read this series, I really recommend it. The final book in the series is coming out this spring, and I cannot wait to read it. And then lastly is The Duke Gets Even by Joanna Shupe. And I'm sorry, I had to put 2 Joanna Shupe books on here. I wasn't going to. And then I was like, I want to though, because There were 5 really, really, really great romance novels I read this year, and 2 of them were by Joanna Shupe. So The Duke Gets Even is the final book in the Fifth Avenue Rebels series, which made me a little sad because I love this series so much. But in this one, we have Nellie, who is one of Catherine's good friends and all the heroines' good friends, and the Duke. The Duke has unsuccessfully courted every other heroine in the books, and he and Nellie really hit it off. But he needs not only a wealthy heiress to bring back to England to save his family, he needs someone who's appropriate for English society. And Nellie is not. Nellie is the woman you go to when you need a condom in 1892 or whatever year it is. And she's very outspoken, and she has a dad who kind of allows her to be this. She also has 50% of her family are like criminals, but like nice ones, you know, not like horrible ones. And this book was so beautiful and did make me cry, which sometimes Joanna Shupe's romance novels make me cry, and this one definitely did. There's also a swimming pool in it, and I don't know if that's historically accurate, and I don't care. So those are my 5. And the winner is The Bride Goes Rogue by Joanna Shupe. I just really loved that book. I thought it was hot, lovely, beautifully written, great character arc for both the hero and the heroine. And it really solidified Joanna Shupe as like a top author in my brain and heart. Let's move on to science fiction and fantasy. I don't read that much sci-fi, so I do bunch them together. The first one is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V. Schwab. I know I'm late to the party and everyone loved this book so much, but it really was such a cool idea that V. Schwab came up with, of this woman that like could live forever but no one could remember her, and what would happen if someone did, and the way she interwove these little vignettes about throughout history how artists kind of could like remember part of her in their brains and like turn it into beautiful pieces of art. I thought it was fantastic. This book made me cry for several days, I think 2, and I loved it, so it's on there. Next up, I've got Ariadne by Jennifer Saint. This is the story of Ariadne. It's a mythology retelling. She is best known as the woman who helped Theseus kill the Minotaur, like helped him get into the labyrinth. And then later she marries Dionysus. This is one of those stories where you follow someone for such a long period of time that you feel like you go on like such a journey with them. And I really enjoyed it. It also made me like super nostalgic for like the time in my life when I was obsessed with mythology, like in particularly Greek mythology. And it also really made me want to go back to Greece, which is probably not in the cards for me for at least 10 years, sadly. Next up, we've got Siren Queen by Nghi Vo, which I was actually really surprised not to see this nominated for Best Fantasy on Goodreads or like anywhere, because this book was fantastic. This is basically like a mythology of early Hollywood. So yeah, like Nghi Vo came up with this idea to look at early Hollywood and the production companies and the actors and actresses and make it like fantasy. And it's so cool. I really hope someone turns this into a movie or series, because I think visually it could be amazing. And you follow a young Chinese American woman named, well, you don't actually really know her name, but her name is Luli, and her making kind of a deal with the devil. It's not the devil, but like definitely a deal with the demon to be famous, and I really loved it. Next, of course, I've got to put on Song of Achilles, another book I'm late to the party on, but another mythology retelling that I thought was absolutely beautiful. And I'm going to be super honest, I've read the Iliad once or twice. I can't remember how many. I think twice. And Achilles is never my favorite character. He's not a great character. He's kind of an a-hole. But when you read this, Madeline Miller is just like so smart. You can tell she's so smart. She knows so much about these myths. And telling it from the point of view of Patroclus, I thought was like such a good choice. And the end of this book was so heartbreaking, even though I knew it was going to happen. I 100% knew it was going to happen. I knew how it was going to happen. I've been reading Greek mythology since I was 9 years old. She still made it break my heart. Good job. Lastly, I have The Sea of Tranquility by Emily St. John Mandel, which is my only sci-fi on this list. I got an arc of it, so that's why I don't have it. And this book was fantastic. It's a very hard book to describe without giving it away, but you're in several different time periods during different pandemics. And Emily St. John Mandel wrote Station 11 about a pandemic before the pandemic. And I read it a very long time ago, probably like 6 or 7 years ago, right after the paperback came out. And one of the characters in this is a woman who's an author who has just published a book about a pandemic while there's a pandemic. But it's like 2200, I think. You go so far into the future, you're all over the solar system. It's beautiful and you should read it. And I can't tell you more without giving it away, other than it's just so good. And there's some time travel in it, which I think if time travel people haven't read it, they definitely should. Yeah, it was great. And the winner is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. I can't help it. I loved it so much. It was just heartbreakingly beautiful and really, really clever. All right, let's move on to mysteries and thrillers. I only have 4 in this category, but the first one is The Woman in the Library by Sulari Gentile. And this is kind of a weird book because I definitely nominated it and loved it because it's so unique. So you're reading kind of a regular mystery about a group of people who are at the Boston Library when a murder takes place and they decide they want to try to solve it. But in between the chapters of the main story, you are getting emails from someone who is reading the pages. The author has sent the pages to this like beta reader or critique partner, and you're getting feedback. And slowly that story of the feedback becomes far more interesting than the other mystery. So if you want to read something that's like a mystery like you've never read before, definitely read this. And you should read the afterword because it was kind of hilarious and really eye-opening. Next, we have The Broken Girls by Simone St. James. This is my first Simone St. James, and I bought this book because I thought the cover looked good and creepy for fall, and I'm so glad I did. So we have 2 timelines. One is 2014, and one is 1950. And in 2014, we have Fiona Sheridan, who's a reporter, and she just cannot get over her sister's murder 20 years ago, even though her sister's boyfriend at the time was convicted and is in jail. She still feels like she doesn't know the whole story. Her sister was killed on this piece of property that this like old school is on and recently has been purchased by a family and they're going to renovate it. And while she's kind of pretending to interview the people buying it, she finds a body, but it's really old. You jump back to 1950 and you're getting the point of view of 4 different students at this house and who it might be. Simone St. James does a great job of weaving the supernatural into her books, into her thrillers in a way I really like. Because I'm going to be super honest, I don't like supernatural thrillers when the killer is a ghost. So that really bothers me. So I really liked how she wove the supernatural in. The book was super creepy. It was fantastic. It definitely converted me to a Simone St. James reader. Next, I've got The Disinvited Guest by Carol Goodman. Carol Goodman is my favorite thriller author. I absolutely love her books, and this one was really great. I just realized this is my second book on my best of that is about a pandemic. So this book takes place in the future. So it's like 10-ish years after the current pandemic we're hopefully almost done with. And it's about a group of friends who during the last pandemic were like in their early 20s, they're in college, and now are in their early 30s. And our main character, Lucy, got really sick during the COVID-19 pandemic, and she has lingering health issues. So both her and her husband are really fearful of her getting sick again, that it would kill her. So they go to this island in Maine that her husband's family owns that has like a really creepy past because it was a place that immigrants with typhus, used to have to go to like get better before they got to come to mainland America. So they go there with some close family and friends, and nothing's as it seems, and you can't leave the island, and you're all trapped, and it was fantastic. And then lastly, I have The Book of Cold Cases by Simone St. James, another double author on my list. Way to go, Simone St. James. So the main character in this one is Shay, and she runs like a true crime website. She has a day job working as like a receptionist in a medical office, I think. But she is like she survived an attempted kidnapping by a man who did kill a different girl in her place. She got away from him. And so she's kind of obsessed with unsolved crimes and runs a successful website. There's a woman in her town, Beth, who was charged with being a serial killer in the 70s, and she went to trial, but she was acquitted. And so this is another dual timeline, which I love so much, in which we're partially in the 70s with Beth, and you're partially in the present day with both of them, as Shay interviews Beth to try and figure out what happened, and I really liked it. Very, very good. I did vote for this one on Goodreads because it was available to be voted for. And my winner is The The Broken Girls by Simone St. James. I thought this book was fantastic. If you haven't read it, especially if you read The Cold Cases and you liked it, definitely pick this one up. Okay, we're going to move on to historical fiction. And my first book that I loved this year was The Book of Longings by Sue Monk Kidd. This is a fictional retelling of Jesus' life in which you get the point of view of Anna, who's his wife. This book is very sad and very beautifully written. Next, I have The Blackbird House by Alice Hoffman. This tells the story of a piece of property over 200 years. So instead of following like a family, you follow a house. And the cool thing about this book is each family or person who you're following gets about 20 pages. And Alice Hoffman manages to make you fall so in love and feel so hard with their hardships with each character that it was really a fantastic read. It's very short. I read it in one day and I heartily recommend it to any Alice Hoffman fans, but also people who like really poignant historical fiction pieces. Next, we've got Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I finally read this book this year and I really enjoyed it. It's sort of like a fictionalized retelling of Fleetwood Mac, which I love Fleetwood Mac. I grew up listening to it because my parents were really into him. It's going to be a series on Hulu, which I can't wait to watch. The whole book is told in interview format, which was very cool. And you got like all the different point of views of the different band members, which I thought was awesome. Next is Woman of Light by Cali Fajardo Anstein. I have such a horrible Spanish accent, so I'm not sure if I said her last name correctly. But this is the story of Luz, who is a young woman living in Denver in the 1930s and kind of the abject racism she faces as a both Spanish-speaking and of Mexican descent person. You also jump back in time a couple times to her grandfather's generation. This book is beautifully written about that time period in Denver, and I loved it. And then lastly is The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This is the last book I read in 2022, and I'm so glad I did because it really deserved to be on this list. It's the story of a woman's life told through her marriages, but it's really not about those men at all. It's about a lifelong love she had, and I absolutely adored it. And because of that, The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo was my number one historical fiction read in 2022. Before I wrote out this script, before I finished it, the winner was going to be Woman of Light by Cali Fajardo Anstein because I did really love this book too, but Evelyn Hugo did sneak out the wind in the end. Next, I have like a general fiction category, and it's kind of a mess, but these are books that were really good that I liked, and I didn't know where else to put them. The first one is The Hotel Nantucket by Alan Hildebrand. This is like a summer read, but like a really good summer read about a hotel in Nantucket and all the people that work there. I thought it was a perfect book to read in June to get me psyched for summer, and I'll definitely pick up more of her books because it was just one of those like really calming, relaxing, nice beach reads. What you imagine when people say they want a beach read. Next was Other Birds by Sarah Addison Allen. And the funny thing is I read this directly after reading The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, and I feel like it was kind of like the antidote. This book made me feel so much better. It is about a found family in South Carolina. It's magical realism, but in a way that I really enjoyed because you've got like the main character who has like an invisible pet bird, and you have a man who lives in her same condo building who wakes up covered in flour every morning because it's his mom's way, who she has died, of telling him she's still watching over him. It's beautiful and definitely a good summer read. If you want to get summer vibes right now, read this book because you'll feel like you're on the coast of South Carolina. Lastly, I didn't know where to put this book, but I loved it. And it was The Cloisters by Katie Hayes. This is a dark academia gothic fiction, but I don't read like heaps of gothic fiction, and it's not a fantasy, and it's not really a mystery or a thriller, even though there is sort of a mystery, but it's a dark academic fiction. So it's about Anne, who has uprooted her life from rural Washington and is kind of alone in New York City. Her original internship falls through, and she gets placed at the Cloisters, which is a museum of medieval art in New York. And after that, you sort of explore the relationships of the people who work at the Cloisters and a mystery about, I'm not going to tell you the mystery because that's a giveaway, but they're also investigating the earliest known tarot cards. And I loved this book. So this section actually has a tie, and the tie is The Cloisters and Other Birds. They're very different and very good. You should read them both. Lastly, I had to stick nonfiction on there. for two reasons. Because I feel like a lot of people think like if you're going to read a nonfiction book, it has to be a serious nonfiction book. But nonfiction is a huge section, speaking as a librarian. And two of the books I read, I feel like are in two sections that get looked over a lot. The first one was Design Mom by Gabrielle Stanley Blair. And she's getting a lot of hype right now because she wrote Ejaculate Responsibly, which I did not read this year. But her Design Mom book was fantastic about how to make your house work, no matter how big it is, depending on how the ages of your children and how to make it work for your family. And I've taken a lot of her advice in sort of not redecorating, just more like moving stuff in our house to make it work better for our family. Great advice. There are pretty pictures. The pictures are nice to look at, but you should actually read the text. And then second was The Forest Feast Road Trip by Erin Gleason. And I have like a lot of feelings about this cookbook series because I started following Erin Gleason when she was just like a person on Tumblr. And now she has like 5 cookbooks. And I think they're fantastic and more people should buy them. So they are beautiful cookbooks also. She is a artist. So she draws, I'm trying to find a good example. She draws alongside her photography and her recipes. They're vegetarian, some are vegan, some are gluten-free, but her stuff is fantastic. And I actually just 2 days ago put this out on my coffee table so I would cook from it more often. So obviously this is going to be my winner, but I only had 2. But we should talk more about cookbooks, interior design books, in my opinion. Okay, so here is what I would have had win in all the Goodreads sections. Let's start with Best Fiction and Other Birds by Sarah Addison Allen. It was nominated and I voted for it. I was very happy I got to vote for it. The Cloisters was not nominated. And I thought it was weird kind of that this was in fiction because magical realism is kind of strange because it's not really fantasy, but it's not really fiction. But I really like this book, so that was my winner. Best Mystery or Thriller, I had to go with The Disinvited Guest by Carol Goodman, which was not nominated. I was a little disappointed with the nominees. I did vote for The Book of Cold Cases because I thought it was really good, but there were 2 books. There was one book on there that I read that I did not like and was kind of mad that it won, I think. Yeah, The Maid. I think The Maid won. I didn't like that book. So, it is what it is. And of course, because it came out this year, Woman of Light is my favorite historical fiction of 2022. It was not nominated. The only book that was nominated that I had read was Magnolia Palace by Fiona Davis, which I liked. I think I ranked that like 3.75 stars, maybe 4 stars, but I didn't vote for it because I feel kind of guilty voting for a book that I didn't love. My favorite fantasy that was new in 2022 was Siren Queen. I was mad. I couldn't vote for it. I was more mad that 2 fantasy books that I really didn't like I gave them 2 stars, I think, both of them, were both nominated. And that was When Women Were Dragons and Kaikeyi. I just didn't really like either of them, and they both got nominated. I don't remember what won. I don't think either of them did win. Electra did get nominated by Jennifer Saint, which I did vote for because I did really like Electra. I just liked Ariadne better, which is why Ariadne made this list and Electra didn't. My best romance is The Bride Goes Rogue by Joanna Shupe because it did come out this year. I didn't vote in the romance category because there was not a single book nominated that I had read, which is kind of crazy, but they don't really nominate historical romance or paranormal romance. It's like all like rom-com-y stuff that I don't read. Science fiction, Sea of Tranquility by Emily St. John Mandel, even though that was the only science fiction book that I read that came out in 2022, I voted for it because I thought it was so amazing and it did win and I was so happy for it. For the horror category, I read Small Angels, which was nominated, but I gave it like 3.5 stars, so I did not vote for it. And then for the graphic novels, I voted for Lore Olympus Volume 2. Even though Saga Volume 9 was my favorite graphic novel I read this year, that came out a lot of years ago. Nonfiction, obviously The Forest Feast Cookbook, which I dropped, and I don't know where I put it. And I didn't read any of the other nonfiction stuff, so I didn't vote for it. And then the other categories were all things I didn't really read, so I didn't vote in them. My favorite debut would have been Called to the Deep by Desiree Nicolai. You should all read it. It's a great horror-y mermaid romance. And let's get on to my personal 6 favorite books of the year. Oh, my favorite 6 new books that came out in 2022 are going to have some overlap with Goodreads, but they are The Bride Goes Rogue by Joanna Shupe, Siren Queen by Nevo, The Disinvited Guest by Carol Goodman, The Sea of Tranquility by Emily St. John Mandel, The Cloisters by Katie Hayes, and Other Birds by Sarah Addison Allen. Those are my 6 favorite new releases. Honestly, I read a lot of really, really good books this year. I just gave you a video with a ton of them, and I hope you had as good of a reading year as I did. And I look forward to 2023 and hope it's just chock full with so many good books. I don't know what to do with myself. If you made it this far in the video, give me a big stack of books emoji, because that's what I've got to clean up now. I'm surrounded by books. As always, I hope you're in the middle of a good book, about to start reading a good book, or about to start writing a great book. See you soon.